had wanted or anticipated this situation to happen because it was a split decision draw. Adeline Bird went ahead and scored it 118 to 110. It left everybody feeling a little underwhelmed, made everybody feel a little uneasy about the decision. Whether it was right or wrong, she is subject to her own opinion. If you ask the masses, this is what's wrong with boxing. It's been this way for a decade, maybe even longer, of issues with judging and everything else like that. So it was hard for me to really figure out how I felt or what the outcome was from the fight. And when you look at it and you're seeing everything firsthand, it was one of those things like, people, we really shouldn't even be here. We shouldn't even be talking about this because this was one of the biggest fights. It should have been a clear, decisive decision by Triple G. Gennady Golovkin won that fight. There is no doubt in my mind or anybody else's mind for that matter. Gennady Golovkin won that fight. Only 3 rounds should have been awarded to Canelo. Canelo did the exact opposite of what I thought he was going to do. I did not anticipate that he was going to run majority of the fight. That's not Canelo's style. But Canelo ran majority of the fight. He didn't even fight full 3 rounds. He fought maybe a minute and a half. And then it was like, hold up. Okay, I need to catch my breath. I need to figure it out all over again on how to get going again. He seemingly gassed out and couldn't figure out what the next alternative was to his game plan. You said that this is what happens when Canelo doesn't fight at his own weight class. That this is what happens when he even fights at his natural weight. No. His natural weight is 165 to 170. That's why 90% of his fights is fought at catch weights. He looked drawn out. He fought hard to get to 160. While he looked great physically, mentally,
it took a lot out of him.
And physique-wise, he was not ready to compete at that level, at that weight class. You fought a pure 160 fighter in Gennady Golovkin. He's natural at 160. That's where he's at. And Canelo had the gumption to finally go down to Triple G's weight class. And I think you saw firsthand why he fights at catchweights. Because 160 is too much of a drop for him. I mean, physically, looked great. But you could tell as the fight progressed, he was not the same Canelo. He was not the same striker. He was not the same fighter. It was as if he was running away because he knew he needed to get his stamina back to re-engage with Gennady Golovkin. Because Gennady Golovkin kept coming and coming and coming. All he did was kept coming forward like a predator.
But was it a little bit demoralizing too when you're looking at the fight, right? And you're looking at Canelo. There was at one point in the fight, Sean, that he cracked him with a solid right. And, I mean, you couldn't land a better punch than what Canelo did. And Triple G just walked right through it and kept walking right through it. To me, as a boxer, that's a little bit more demoralizing. That's like, dude, I gave you my best shot.
I gave it my all.
And you just walked right through it.
And that's when you realize that Canelo didn't have the it. Did not have the strength to finish. And that was when you saw him hit Gennady Golovkin a couple times with some hard shots that would typically put down anybody. But Triple G didn't go down. Now, it could be either a testament that Triple G could take one heck of a shot, or it came down to the fact that because of the fact that Canelo finally made 160, it was seemingly too much. He lost too much weight. He didn't have the power behind his punches. So it left it open. And that's why we ended up at 12 rounds, because he couldn't finish the fight like a typical Canelo. Anybody that watches Canelo can attest to that was not Canelo.
Right?
Anybody that says that was Canelo is fooling themselves.
Most definitely.
If you want to see a rematch of Canelo versus Triple G, there's only one way to do it. And that is to make the fight a catchweight fight at 165 and call it a day. Because that's the only way you'll get a real fight between Canelo and Gennady Golovkin. Or else you will see the same thing with the same result, the same sketchiness all over again. And people are talking about what's next for Gennady Golovkin. This is the thing that gets a little wishy-washy.
Yes, it
There's
does.
talks about Saunders wanting to fight Triple G in December. Triple G wants to fight again this year. However, there is immediate contract discussion going into play for May of 2018 for a rematch against Canelo and Gennady Golovkin. So that would indicate neither fighter fights this year, which then makes an interesting thing because you've got Saunders, who's one of another rising top prospects in the middleweight division, not getting an opportunity at two of the bigger fighters. But now the other question remains is that there was talks about Miguel Cotto, is that if he doesn't fight David Lemieux, he may have gotten the winner or the loser of this fight. So if he does that, then if they're not going to fight this year, then why not put Saunders against Miguel Cotto?
See,
that's the thing that I'm thinking about.
Now this is where it's going to get interesting because you got Miguel Cotto that wants his last fight, and rightfully so, wants a payday. I don't blame the guy. But when you're talking about Saunders, you're talking about a guy that is starting to make a name for himself, starting to push the envelope a little bit more. I believe this is a good fight that if we look at it from a Gennady Golovkin standpoint, it's a good fight for him. But then I look at it that, dude, he's going to get beat up. I don't think there's anybody out there right now that one-on-one is going to be able to take Triple G one-on-one. It's not going to happen. You're looking at a guy that's getting longer in the tooth, a guy that is still performing at his level. The only interesting thing is that you got an Olympian, you have a guy from the UK, you have a lot of stuff that could ride this into a payday fight. It's just that the way that I look at it, man, you're going to really have to dig deep to find out matches that kind of plays the sides both. Because the only legitimate cause for concern, if you will, is that Gennady Golovkin wants an immediate rematch. Canelo wants no part of it.
No, it's the other way around.
No. Gennady Golovkin immediately rematch, yes. De La Hoya and Canelo, nah, I'm good right now. So, at what point are these guys looking at a payday for these guys? At what point? Because something for either one has to come down through the pipe and it has to make sense, logical for both of them. Canelo not willing to step inside the ring again to face Triple G makes me pause a little bit for Canelo, because where does he want to go? Does he all of a sudden look at Triple G as an opponent that he knows that he cannot beat? So you look at a record from a record standpoint. Does a rematch benefit Canelo? And as you can see, we are repping down to scrap. Thank you, Juan Vera, for supporting your boys. That's the issue. And Triple G versus Saunders makes sense just for pure unification standpoint. You know, you get titles. Like, I'm all for unification of titles.
Yes, get rid of as many titles as possible.
You can. So that's the only sticking point that I believe that makes that fight reasonable, is that you get two guys, two title holders, and a unification possibility.
Okay, let's take it one step further. if that fight makes sense because of unification purposes, does it also make sense for the fact that if Triple G and Canelo did not pull in the numbers that people thought that they were going to, again, the preliminary numbers that came out is that they pulled in a little over 2 million buys, which is beneath the number in which Oscar De La Hoya had mentioned.
Yes.
The Gates only pulled in $30 million. So if you are Triple G or Canelo, if you're either one of those camps at this point in time, why would you want a rematch? If the first anticipated pay-per-view fight for supremacy of the middleweight division didn't go over like people thought they were going to, why would you want that rematch if you can go and fight a guy like a Saunders and put another middleweight top prospect out there for the masses to visually see and put out there another fighter that people should recognize? Because Saunders apparently wants to fight the best.
And I'm okay with everybody stepping up and fighting the best.
So why not abort shit in this Triple G and Canelo? You know, it was garbage the fact that it was a split decision draw.
Oh, hands down.
But the good thing at the end, if there is a bright spot, Tristan, is the fact that both of them kept their respective titles. They didn't really put a blemish on their resume outside of the draw at the end. So let Canelo go do what Canelo wants. Triple G, go do what you want to do. And then if you both are still the supremacy again at the end of the day, then let's think about doing that rematch.
Right, and I also think that when you look at Triple G too, is that he's in his late 30s. So what does he have? Maybe 3 fights left?
Maybe.
Like, if he's smart, he has 3 fights left. So take 2 lesser known fights, and then maybe you relook at again a Canelo versus Triple G at the end. Because then I think that benefits Canelo. Because Canelo's younger.
He's still got a lot more years
left in boxing. Triple G will be really older, slowed down. So now you have an opportunity that Canelo might be able to put in a little bit more effort against a slower version.
Because we may end up seeing the new version of Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. The older versus the younger, the more savvy versus the guy that is the more in your face. The game could ultimately completely change again. But at some point, you have to look into your bag of tricks and figure out how you can justify the end. Because you can't keep having corrupt judging in boxing, because it'll ultimately kill this sport even more than what it is.
Black eye.
It's like the old tired line is that, what is it? Is that for every good step you take forward, you take 5 steps backwards.
Ain't that the truth?
Boxing takes 1 good step forward and takes like 9,000 steps backwards.
Right.
It leaves you questioning about where is this sport going? What is the end game here? Because they put on these fights and they give you that end of the day of like, oh my God, we're finally going to get this fight going. This is what's going to put boxing back on its map. And then you're left going, really?
2 things.
We're here again?
Right. 2 things in the chat room. Lacey, love you, darling. Always a pleasure to have you in the chat room.
Cody.
Nathan, Cody Vidal. Too much money is at risk if they each take other fights. I agree to a certain extent. I just think that the way that boxing is, this is the way that it's going to go. There's not going to be an immediate rematch. It's not.
We'll find out in 3 weeks. They have 3 weeks to figure it out.
But before we go into a break here is, since we're on the boxing note, I gotta give a little shout out here. Is Deontay Wilder signs on the dotted line against Luis Ortiz.
Finally, he fights a competitor.
Right.
The issue that I have with Deontay Wilder is that this guy has all the tools in the shed to be a top heavyweight, but his technique, his style is not up to par with where it should be. He is what many people, not my words, many people who classify him as a paper champion. Somebody that fights the middle of the road fighters, gets a title, and then holds on to it, and doesn't fight of anybody of any value.
Michael Zahn says he's a fan of Wilder.
I'm a fan of Wilder. He's got the potential. He's got the charisma. Could you imagine that if he gets past Luis Ortiz, the biggest talk that everybody's talking about,
put him against Anthony Joshua.
That's what they're talking about. That's what this prelude is too.
Although if you hear Tyson Fury, that boy is still talking.
Tyson Fury needs to drop weight, stop doing drugs on the sideline or taking steroids, whatever he's doing, and focus that if he wants to come back for his title, come back for his title. But if you're Deontay Wilder, you've got your first true test in front of you after all these years.
And this will either showcase you or showcase you wrong, because last time I believe the guy that he fought was Washington, wasn't it?
Where I want to see that. People in the chat room, Domingo Carrillo, what's up, my dude? Another native. Thank you for joining the show.
What's interesting is that when you look at the fight itself, he was getting worked and outworked and outpunched and outboxed, and then all of a sudden he was able to clip him. I'm afraid that if he steps into the cage against a guy like none other than Anthony Joshua, who is a little bit more polished boxer, a little bit more polished heavyweight guy, does that pose an interesting threat? See, Washington, I think, went 18-1. See? Yeah, so I believe that that's an interesting twist that here we go. Anthony Joshua, more polished fighter. Do we see a change of the guard? Do we see the downside of Wilder if he gets a shot against Anthony Joshua?
And that's the thing that I believe will happen, is that when you've got Wilder who stylistically is wide, rangy, not technically sound, against a guy who is legitimately one of the best heavyweights since the Klitschko's, that finally somebody walked in and beat a Klitschko. If you can beat one of the best heavyweight, pure stylistic strikers in boxing,
which were the Klitschko's,
you are above the rest.
You are a testament to time and management, that when you are there and you're putting in the work and the effort, that changes the guard. And you saw that when you saw Joshua take Klitschko completely out of his game, and he's the world champion and Klitschko's retired.
Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts coming up in boxing again, that if you can get the judges out of their own head, out of the corrupt world, the evolution of boxing is still there. But it needs to be the right people in the right place, judging the right things. There needs to be monitors in front of them so they can watch strategically about what's going on in front of them if they can't visually see. Because, dude, I hate to say that, you know what, that we've been at the judging table.
Yes,
we've been in the lines. Sometimes it is hard to judge about what you're seeing in front of you, that sometimes when you look down at a monitor, you could see something that you may have missed by a split second, or saw it a little bit cleaner because you saw it from a little bit of a different angle. There's been talks about for years of, let's put instant replay in the judge's hands. I agree.
Absolutely.
Instant replay has benefited all across all sports.
I understand that a lot of people don't want to take the human aspect out of it. I get it.
But it's been taken out in almost all sports, whether it's football, hockey, baseball. They've implemented it somewhere, shape, or form.
Cody Vidal says, let's talk about the Super 8 Cruiserweight tournament for the Muhammad Ali Trophy. Dude, we talked about that, what?
Like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, and I'm telling you, dude, like, that Super 8 Cruiserweight division that's going on right now for the Muhammad Ali Trophy is an incredible feat in itself.
But it's also not just the cruiserweights that are in it.
Right, it's not just the cruiserweights. There's 2 different weight classes that are in it. But, dude, man, Showtime did their first original version of this. Now there's a little bit more bigger global aspect behind it in this version of it, which I absolutely love.
Like a couple weeks ago when we talked about the Super 8 tournament, whatever it may be, one thing we did touch on is the fact that it was supposed to be televised.
Yes.
U.S. based as well.
And then apparently somewhere they lost the contract.
We have not seen it come this way because there was talks about it going to Showtime.
Yep. And
we have not seen a transition over. We've heard so-and-so won their first matchup versus so-and-so, and it's like, it's supposed to be on TV, right? So that could bring boxing back if it's done correctly. That's another thing that we talked about, that if you could show this to the masses, it could be great.
But when you kind of hide it,
it takes away and it takes the value away of the benefit of that helps out boxing.
Because we were the first ones that was on this Muhammad Ali trophy and how incredible it was and about the prize at the end of all. And then all of a sudden it just kind of fell flat. And that's the issue with boxing, is that if the promotions aren't out there and they're not marketing it right, they're not diving into it, then it becomes kind of irrelevant at this point, because you hear about it, then you're going to wait for another 2 months to see a fight again of the Super 8. It makes you question about whether or not it's actually something that's beneficial for the sport or hindering the sport.
And that's been my drawback with boxing, is that when you have too many titles, you have so many good up and coming fighters, you devalue the titles, you devalue everything else in boxing. So when you look at it and you see, well, this is what's going on, you're wondering about why is it that you can't value the fighters or put them out there for everybody to understand who they are.
Domingo, it didn't go anywhere. It just moves down the ladder. You have to just search for it. But yeah, so the World Boxing Super Series, we'll touch on it next week a little bit more and dive into that a little bit more.
Because I agree with Cody. It's like next week, Cody, we'll talk about the Super 8. We'll talk about that tournament in general to give everybody up to speed about what's going on, because many people probably don't know about it. So, Cody, thank you for bringing that up. We'll talk about that next week.
Absolutely. But we are the Sports Warriors. I'm Tristan Ducross. On my side, as always, my brother Sean Ducross. As you can see, Juan Vera supported your boys down to scrap. You believe it. If you don't, then you don't know what you're missing. But go to down to scrap and you'll get their products. Amazing stuff. Amazing guys. We're going to be doing a little bit more stuff with them here too. So stay tuned for that. But you can friend us on Facebook, Sean and Tristan Ducross. Go to our webpage, www.ducrossbrothers.com. Friend us on Twitter. Follow us, whatever it may be. In the meantime, Sean, Bellator brings a flying cage. Apparently, we are definitely going to the WWE, WCW,
Hell
TNA
in a Cell.
You believe it. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Sean and Tristan Across the Sports Warriors. Check us out on Facebook Live and YouTube on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or you can visit our website at www.drewcrossbrothers.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. We are the Ducross Brothers, the Sports Warriors. I'm Tristan Ducross, along my side as always, my partner in crime, Sean Ducross. Sean, incredible show. Everybody that's tuning in from Domingo Creel, our fellow native bro. He's in the chat room. Lacey Hancock, always a pleasure. Joshua Waterman, John Andrews, Nathan, Juan Vera, sporting down to scrap on our show. Mad respect to everybody that's tuning into us today. Sean, Bellator 183, Bellator Kickboxing 7 is going down this weekend, and they've developed a flying cage that was, I would say it was in like the UK and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, here comes the flying cage into the US. It will debut at Bellator 183.
Makes me think
Kickboxing 7, because my immediate reaction when I saw the video was like, dude, are you serious right now?
Has me thinking about Hell in a Cell, because when you're looking at WWE, when they do Hell in a Cell, they bring down the cage. Well, when they transition from MMA to kickboxing, they're going to bring down the flying cage. And yes, they trademarked the flying cage. See, but my immediate reaction when I saw the video of it, when it was sent to us, I was like, dude, that's pretty cool. That's pretty dope.
When you're having a hybrid show, you want to think about that. You have to be able to transition between two shows, right? So ultimately, the best thing to do to go between two shows is none other than, well, let's have a flying cage, because we can take it up, we can drop it down, and it's like, I wanted to say that they
insert the ring girls to do a little twerking,
right? And I want to see that, what is it, like 15 seconds between the time that the cage comes down, locks it in, they can begin the show.
When you talk about that, it's still going to be interesting to see how the dynamic plays out when the first Bellator and kickboxing hybrid show happened. It went completely sideways. It wasn't the best. And when you look at it and you're like, we're doing this again? Like, all right, here we go. And then there's like, oh, by the way, we're inserting the flying cage. Like, you do realize Bellator Dynamite, while it was a success, among the media people, it was classified kind of a failure. Many people didn't like how the transition of kickboxing to MMA transitioned throughout the night. Granted, this one may be a little bit easier because in the Kickboxing 7 of Bellator, you only have essentially two fights. You have Kahaji versus Raymond Daniels for one of the title belts. Then you have Kevin Ross going after the inaugural featherweight title. That's it. But how it plays out structurally, it'll be interesting to see how that all composes this time. What did they learn from Dynamite versus what did they learn to where we're at now? That's the interesting thing. The fact that this card is stacked from the top to the bottom with interesting fights is great.
Michael Zahn, no. Neither one of them are on the card. No Joe Schilling, no Artem Levin, not on Bellator Kickboxing. Pretty much the only two fights that I absolutely know of is Kevin Ross is on it and the freak Raymond Daniels is on it. So
the highlight reel,
right.
Raymond Daniels.
That is
Mr.
Really,
spinning back kick and whatever spinning juju he seems to wanting to do.
Yeah, that is really the only two main fights that I know 100% that is on that. Other than that, not a lot of pub, not a lot about Bellator Kickboxing 7 is out there. And it's kind of disappointing because they didn't plug Raymond Daniels. They didn't plug Kevin. Nathan says he's pretty sure that Joe Schilling's on Bellator 7. Well, if somebody can float me the card real quick, because as far as I know, I've only heard two fights that are literally on that card. But Bellator 183 has Henderson versus Pitbull. And realistically, Benson Henderson should be 0-3 in a Bellator cage. Am I right? That's the issue that we are having right now with Bellator 183. Benson Henderson headlining 155-pound contest. He beat a Patricky Pitbull's brother by a leg injury, so technically he should be 0-3. I'm just not impressed with Benson Henderson coming over into Bellator. I'm really not. And then you have Big Country making his debut against Javier Ayala. And I think Javier Ayala is an interesting foe when you're thinking that here's a guy that's on a 2-fight win streak and knocked out Sergey in 16 seconds, I believe it was. So, Bellator 183, stacked card, better than what I originally thought was going to happen. And basically, when you're looking at the card, Lorenz Larkin's on it versus Paul Daly. I feel bad for, I don't know who I'm more mad at. Am I more pissed off at Paul Daly or Lorenz Larkin at this point?
And when you're looking at who you're more pissed off about, Paul Daly or Lorenz Larkin, yeah, considering that these two guys absolutely do not like each other. These two guys have had war of words for the last couple of weeks. You have Lorenz Larkin saying, I absolutely don't like the guy. You got
Called him an MFer.
Paul Daly saying this guy fight is beneath me. He's fought nobody. It's like, okay, here's what we're going to get, people. Lorenz Larkin's going to punch Paul Daly in the face. Paul Daly's going to punch Lorenz Larkin in the face. That's what we're going to see here.
But this is where I hope Lorenz Larkin, because he lost his first fight, okay?
If he loses this one.
If he loses again in a Bellator cage, every momentum that led him up to this point, led him up to the Douglas Lima fight for that title, for him to lose in the fashion that he did, for him to get a shot against Paul Daly, another top-ranked fighter. If he loses again, he has a long road to head up.
When you look at trying to recover from a loss, when you're looking at recovering from situations, this has a chance to be the fight of the night because these two guys are going to slug it out. And when you're looking about the cream of the crop in terms of peer strikers, you're getting nobody better than Lorenz Larkin and Paul Daly.
But this is where I think Lorenz Larkin needs to go to his wrestling. I don't want to stand there and trade with Paul Daly because he's a one-trick pony. He's a one-dimensional fighter.
He's a kickboxer.
So let's say Lorenz Larkin, get the fight to the ground. Use your wrestling and beat this guy into submission. The only way you know how to is take Paul Daly completely out of his game.
And you know what? Before we continue to talk about the Bellator 183, I will touch on what John Andrews just said. It's a great fight, but Lima should have the big name fight instead of Larkin. He is. Lima is signed on to fight Rory MacDonald.
Yes, sir.
That was announced. That was confirmed. Lima's getting his big payday. Whether he ends up in a body bag is completely a different story.
Can you imagine if the Red King comes in and takes the title off of Douglas Lima and puts him in the body bag and the grave that the Red King has deemed that he will start putting people in? Can you imagine that, John? John Andrews? Oh, yes.
So, you look at Glory Kickboxing, their bouts right now is that you do have Joe Schilling on versus Adali. See, Joe Schilling is one of those interesting guys.
He's not an MMA guy.
He's not an MMA guy. He's a kickboxing guy. But to me, he's never lived up to the hype of stitch him up.
No.
He's never been that guy. And yet, somehow, he's made a name for himself that completely stands out to everybody says, you know what? He's one of the top premier kickboxers in the world. But to me, there's nothing fancy about it. Freaking, they brought over Malapet. We know who Malapet is.
We've covered how many fights of Malapet's?
If you don't know who Malapet is in Muay Thai, then you guys been living underneath a rock. How is that fight on a preliminary card and not on the actual main event card?
That is somebody not knowing who Malapet is. That is somebody not knowing who Malapet is. This fool is 145 wins in Muay Thai.
So, they've got a good card. Whether we see it, it'll remain to be seen. But it'll probably be on, what is it? It'll be on Spike TV.
Yep.
It'll be on there. But again, you got the inaugural title shot of Kevin Ross versus Domenico Lomerano. So you'll have that. So you have all that going on. So it's a pretty good fight card. Just surprised that nobody else really mentioned it up until this point. Because they've got some key people going in and fighting on this card that you're not really hearing about except for the 2 title shots.
Fight Book MMA, Roberto Villa wants to know, what about Gabriel Gonzaga making his boxing debut in October? Dude is going to get slept.
What about Jimmy Manuwa versus David Haye? Apparently got into it at Bama.
Does not surprise me.
Like, we'll touch on that at the end just because it's random. But to get back to Bellator 183 being legit, you talked about Roy Nelson, you talked about Javi Ayala. You got to look at the fact that Benson Henderson comes in this fight 1-2 in Bellator, tore his ACL
at the beginning of 2017.
Patricky Pitbull came in and knocked out Josh Thompson
with rather quick fashion.
You're talking about outside looking in. What happens to Benson Henderson if he goes 1-3 in Bellator?
He's going to get bounced to Bellator Kickboxing. Or he's going to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. That's the only way that this goes for Benson Henderson. Because he cannot stand there and take punishment from Pitbull because of the power. There's a difference between Pitbull and his little brother, okay? This Pitbull will stand there in your face, throw a ridiculous amount of power punches at you, and tries to take your head off. Benson Henderson's only option here is just kind of like Lorenz Larkin. Man, you got to get this to the ground. You don't want to stand with this guy. You don't want, if you don't have the power or the technique to stand there or the jaw.
The difference between Patricky and Patricio is one thing. Patricio, while he has all the power in the world, he has more composure.
I was just going to say, that fight's a little bit smarter.
Patricky loves to lean back and sit back on that back leg, ready to unload that right hand. If Benson Henderson can avoid the power coming at him and capitalize on a counter, he can put Patricky to sleep. But whether he does that is a completely different story. But that seems to be the theme of Bellator 183. Who's going to go to sleep? Right? Because then you go down the fight card. And the other one that sticks out again is Mr. Big Mouth himself and Aaron Pico. And Aaron Pico set to make his second debut fight.
Oh my God, this kid. I swear.
Mr. I want to fight the best of the best. Well, guess what? You're now dropping down from lightweight to featherweight. You got a guy who is pretty good. And who did he fight?
Zach Freeman.
There you go. Zach Freeman, and a pretty good guy that's been around the block for a little bit. In the lightweight. Now he drops down to featherweight and faces a guy named Justin Lin. Justin Lin's been around the block for a while. And fought for RFA for quite a while.
Now, my only thing about Aaron Pico is this, Sean. Aaron Pico. I'm looking at this guy. He's coming in here. Yes, In MMA, you win some, you lose some. I really do get it.
It's how well do you recover.
Right. Here's a guy that decided to go to AKA. AKA isn't quite exactly what it used to be. Now, does this help him? Does it get him further in the game? Here's a guy that is an Olympic wrestler, Gold Glove winner, but yet
He has all the tools.
all the tools and all the pedigree. But then again, I look at him like he's the Cleveland Browns quarterback. Like, how many quarterbacks has Cleveland had? Tim Couch. They have Deshaun Kaiser right now.
They had Brent and they had Hoyer.
Right, you had RG3. You have guys that have had several amount of talent. Turn out to be busts.
But here, what was one thing
Do we look at him as a potential bust? With all the hype and the narrative around him.
Your comparison to them almost was on cue. It was just slightly skewed a little bit. You look at Tim Couch, you look at RG3, you look at Hoyer. What is something they all have in common? They all had some type of a talent, but seemingly portrayed as if they didn't have the work ethic. That, well, I've got the physical tools to do this, this, and this. But at the end of the day, I can't perform at my ultimate best because I don't put in the best. So is Aaron Pico putting in the best work possible for his fights, or is he trying to solely rely on his pedigree and where he got
not putting
to?
in that work?
Exactly.
Last man in, last man out is the way that it should be.
When you look at the greats, whether they're in mixed martial arts, whether they are in any sport for that matter, what makes them great is the tireless work ethic they put into it and the end game. Is Aaron Pico really putting in the tireless work ethic to become great? That's the question that remains to be seen. If he loses to Justin Lin,
and he starts his career 0-2, I'm calling out his work ethic.
Is he
the
essentially,
pedigree.
is he what many people classify maybe as a Sage Northcutt?
All the hype that surrounds them, and they can't live up to it because that work ethic is not there. If that work ethic is not there, it shows up on tape, it shows up in fights, and you can't wash off that stench.
And you can't teach that, right?
How you doing?
Realest guys in the room.
We're your boys. I'm Tristan Ducross. This is my brother, Sean Ducross. We are the Sports Warriors. Coming up next, no fluff, real opinions, real talk. That's what we do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with your boys. Sean, UFC Fight Night 117 preview. Just felt like we had a fight night, which we did, and we'll talk about that fallout as well. So sit tight real quick. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come on back.
You're listening to Sean and Tristan across the Sports Warriors. Check us out on Facebook Live and YouTube on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or you can visit our website at www.jewcrossbrothers.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. We are the Ducross Brothers Sports Warriors. This is Sean. I'm Tristan Ducross. We are the Ducross Brothers, representing Down to Scrap from Juan Vera and Company. Stay tuned for more with them and stuff like that. They got a new mouthpiece with SureFit, so stay up with that. In the meantime, UFC Fight Night 117 is coming up, and it's headlined by...
But wait, breaking news.
What do you got?
Dustin Poirier is going to be taking on Anthony Pettis, but the shocker that's on the card is, he hasn't retired? Andrei Arlovsky is fighting on the card. Why is the Pitbull still fighting?
He's going to get slept.
Like, why? Like, do we really want to see him regress and regress some more?
Michael Zahn says Enzo Amore is the new Cruiserweight show now.
He is. 205 Live.
It's funny how a lot of people in the chat room today is getting our innuendos of wrestling.
Right? It's great to have him in the chat room. I'm just surprised we haven't seen our buddy Roberto chime in with some WWE reference. But then again, he only watches combat.
Right?
Yeah, I said it, Roberto. But
he doesn't know what 4th and long is in football because he doesn't even watch football. So it just goes right over his head on that one too.
But so UFC Fight Night 117, St. Preux versus Okami. And I say it that way because Ofen St. Preux was supposed to fight
Shogun,
but Shogun got injured, and then Yushin Okami said, "Wait, you're fighting in Japan? Ooh, I want on it. It doesn't matter if I've been out of MMA for 4 years.
It doesn't matter if it's at 205,
but I still come back." You cray.
It's funny though because he's not a 205er. And here's a guy that says he's returning back to the UFC after he got knocked out by Yakurai Souza.
And he was released. And then he's been gone from the sport for 4 years. And then they finally go to Japan, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're going to put a bunch of Japanese fighters on this card and say, guess what? We've arrived." Like, yo, no. But Ofen St. Preux
1-3 in his last 4.
And Yushin Okami is coming off a 4-year hiatus.
But he has a 4-fight win streak, so he's winning.
In Japan?
Yes.
So, it's one of those interesting bouts. Who does it really benefit? Does it really benefit Yushin Okami? Does it benefit St. Preux? If you're talking about Okami's been away from the UFC for 4 years, and he puts St. Preux to sleep, this is where it gets interesting because OSP 1-3 in his last 4 gets to the point where OSP with his up and down career needs a win bigger than anything, because if he goes to 1-4 in his last 5, OSP and the once highly thought of prospect is just an afterthought in the UFC. Yushin Okami's win over OSP gets him back into a spot that, 4 wins, moves to 5 wins, comes back to the UFC. Does he right this shit for his career? Where does this actually put these two fighters? Because remember, Shogun was supposed to be in this fight. An injury he had him pull out. I wonder how many people in the chat room knows exactly, without Googling it, where's this fight going to air?
Oh, yes.
What channel is this fight going to air?
Yep.
When I saw what channel is going to air, I was like, is that an error? Is that really going to be on that channel? Like, okay.
I know, I had to do a double take because I'm used to it being on Fox. On Fox Sports, that kind of deal. And then all of a sudden I was like,
some of it's been on Fight Pass.
Right. Roberto Villa, you got that right.
FXX. The second FX network.
Not the first FX network, the second.
The second.
The one that nobody really cares about.
Not the one that originally had the Tough Enough series with the big heavy guys fighting on a yellow mat. Not that one. But the subsidiary to FXX. That just sounds inappropriate. And apparently that's where it's going to be on Japan. And then the prelims are going to be all still on Fight Pass.
Blessman Sanso says, "Hi brothers, live for what? Dude, we are live talking combat sports. So if you like combat sports, welcome."
But the card's not that bad. The card's better than UFC 116 was.
Yeah.
The UFC Fight Night 116 left me scratching my head about, did that just go down? This one's interesting because like your main event is St. Preux versus Okami. When the main event to me should be Claudia Gadelha versus Jessica Andrade. You're talking about when we talked about Paul Daly and Lawrence Larkin hating each other?
These two hate each other.
I wouldn't say they necessarily hate each other. They're just not feeling each other right now. And Claudia Di Gardelia called out this fight on Instagram.
Well, yes,
Jessica said,
nobody
yes,
would
please.
fight her. Nobody would fight Claudia. So Claudia was like, dude, I want to stay active. I want to be like the Donald Cerrone of the women's division. Somebody come out and fight me. Like, she was literally trying to call out everybody and their mama to get a fight, and the only one that took the bait was Jessica.
And it's good and bad. Because the way that I looked at it is like, Claudia, since losing to JJ,
is now 2-0.
Has gone 2-0, and Jessica Andrade is coming off of her first loss to JJ.
Absolutely.
Either way you look at it, because the division is regurgitating contenders like it's going out of style,
one of these two, win or lose, will get a title shot.
Exactly. So you look at this as like either A, you're going to win, you're going to see Gardelia versus JJ number 3, maybe third time's the charm, and she wins. Or Jessica Andrade doesn't tire her out and actually puts her to sleep in the first round in match number 2. Either way, these are what you're seeing here is the next number 1 contender for JJ's title shot. Then you got to look at that. We were asked this months ago, maybe a year ago.
Right.
When Kohian Saki was signed to UFC. People were asking us, oh my God, one of the best premier kickboxers
in the world
is signed to UFC. What do you guys think? Well, we said as long as he doesn't get somebody that fights on the ground, he'll be perfectly fine.
But he got KO'd in his first ever MMA fight, but nobody seems to realize that.
Because it was Cage Fight Championship. So you look at it, and you see that he was TKO'd via punches, and now he's signed with the UFC. He gets the stylistical fight that he's been looking for in his debut. The stylistic fight that you and I said would benefit him and his future. He gets Henrik da Silva, who is 12-3, lost his last 3 fights, but the guy loves to stand up and trade. He's a striker first and foremost. He lost his last 2 fights via armbar and KO, but he has finished 11 fights out of his 12.
So you know what you're getting out of Silva is that you're getting a guy. I'm going to butcher your first name, but Dappers. Dude, thank you for tuning in, brother. This fight with Saki and Silva, I always look for stylistic matchups, especially for somebody that's trying to make a debut or make an impact inside an octagon at this point in time of his career.
Yeah.
This matchup, 1-on-1, you can't put this on paper and not expect possibly a fight in the night contender.
Yeah, or a knockout that makes highlight reels for the foreseeable future. But one that made the highlight reel was the fact that Luke Rockhold made David Branch tap out due to strikes.
Dude,
and David Branch said he didn't quit.
We talked about David Branch coming back over into the UFC. Did we not? Did we not forewarn everybody about David Branch coming over to the UFC, about what happened last time? Would it be any different? Hello? 2 fights in, it ain't any different. David Branch is still David Branch. And he tries to sleepwalk through his opponents, but when you get game opponents, you can't do that.
And Luke Rockhold was a game opponent. Luke Rockhold came out doing what Luke Rockhold does. Let's throw kicks. Let's throw the kitchen sink.
Luke Rockhold looked like the old Luke Rockhold.
He had a couple rough spots. But ultimately, when the second round came, he grappled. He got into the nitty-gritty. He got the fight down to the ground and used his jiu-jitsu to transition to the back to basically work. And David Branch,
tapped out due to strikes,
who people have known to have pretty good jiu-jitsu, just seemingly let Rockhold go to full mount,
right?
Didn't take his back, and just rain punches. Luke Rockhold then saw fit to go take a shot at GSP.
Tell him to forfeit.
Pump your brakes. Let's go ahead and see what Luke Rockhold has in store for the division. because he says he wants to put the division back where it should be. He wants to finish what he had started. Well, maybe you should stop dating Demi Lovato and stop modeling for 2 seconds and get back into
Stop dating Demi Lovato.
Focus on your task at hand. You want to recover your lost title.
My focus would be on Demi Lovato.
Sure.
I'm not sorry.
Hashtag I'm not sorry.
Nope.
But
I'm single, so it's okay for me to say that.
But Rockhold needs to be sorry to that division for leaving it high and dry for as long as he did without any really top contenders. So who can he fight next? Many people are saying, well, what about Yoel Romero?
What about Robert Whittaker?
Robert Whittaker was an interesting one to me because he's sitting in the wings waiting for the outcome of Michael Bisping and GSP. So why not put those two in a interim title match and put
another fake title fight? No.
But put Robert Whittaker's interim title up on the line against Luke Rockhold, and then the winner gets GSP or Michael Bisping if Michael Bisping doesn't retire.
Well, also think about this too.
Because Michael Bisping's talking about retirement.
Dude, if GSP wins the fight, right, and becomes the champion, there was no way humanly possible that Luke Rockhold and GSP happens. Like, that's real talk, folks. Luke Rockhold, GSP ain't happening anytime soon if GSP wins that title. So then where does that leave him? You don't get a GSP Whittaker, Yoel Romero. You don't get none of these fights if GSP wins. The only fight Rockhold gets that only makes sense is you put him against Chris Weidman. That's it. Like, there's nothing left for this division if Michael Bisping does not win this fight. Like, that's how bad that this could be for the UFC. Because we're going to literally have a fake title champion without a real champion ever defending the title because
GSP's not going to defend it.
Right. GSP wins the title. He's going to be gone for a year and a half. He won't defend his title.
But if Michael Bisping wins, Michael Bisping retires.
Right. So we're stuck with it. Fake title.
So then it comes back to the only matchup that makes sense
is the Robert Whittaker
versus Luke Rockhold.
Yes.
That is the only fight that makes sense for the future of this division.
And you have to do it.
For the better of the division.
Yep.
Is you have to put these two against each other for the future of this division. Then you look at the fact that you got Mike Perry versus Thiago Alves, but Thiago Alves had to pull out due to whatever may be.
I don't feel bad for Thiago Alves for pulling out, and I hate Mike for even bringing this to light because, dude, okay, they both have families, right?
Yeah.
What I don't like about Mike, and this is where you have to have some kind of respect for somebody with a family, and Mike Perry has none because Thiago Alves made a family decision when the Hurricanes were coming to Florida, coming to Miami. He made the decision that he was going to stay home with his family because it was his first hurricane and he would rather be there with his family.
Rightfully so.
Mike Perry said, "No, I'm good. I'm going to go fight."
So Mike Perry fought Alex Reyes on 3 days' notice and put him to sleep. And then calls out Robbie Lawler. We know you got power for days, but pump your brakes. This whole Mike Perry thing's gotten more traction than it should have because now you've got Christopher Curtis being trolled by Mike Perry all over your social media. That fight is intriguing. I say let's make that one happen. Christopher Curtis wants to make that fight happen from Team Quest. Make that fight happen.
Until next time, we are your boys. We are the Sports Warriors. I'm Tristan Ducross. Along my side, as always, my brother Sean Ducross. You can friend us on Facebook, Sean and Tristan Ducross. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here, down to scrap. Believe it.
So thank you to everybody that joined us. Down to scrap, like he just mentioned, Fightbook MMA. You name it. Anybody else out there, Muay Thai Authority, all them guys, everybody that joined us. Stay tuned.
Yep. Till next time, we're out.
Showdown. Now the Ultimate Octagon Insider, Sean